This is Rick the Liberty at CIPI Studios, and this is part of Treaty 10 News. And part of our civic responsibilities is to let people know what's happening in our own communities and in our region. And we have Daigneault, the mayor of the northern village of Beauval, here to give us an update and a few questions about what's planned for the 2024.
For sure. Thanks, Rick.
So in terms of Christmas is coming along, it's a year end. You've made quite a few moves, I guess, not only in the village infrastructure, but also some corporate developments on some investments that you're doing in business. So
For sure.
maybe just go low down, give us an update on what you have are willing to share at this
For
time.
sure, yeah. There's some stuff that are still in development for sure. So I'll be careful to not get too much into that until there's something to definitely announce there. So, yeah, the ABCs of community development. Where do I start? So obviously there's some things that have already been announced that you have seen posted from the village. So we'll start there. Really some quick things. We've made some little moves with our purchase of the MD's confectionery store. Obviously everybody who's in Beauval has seen the post office move across the street to our fitness center.
Correct.
And so we've converted the rec center there into what we're hoping is a semi-permanent home for the post office. We've tried to build them their own home, but it's a bit of a struggle dealing with federal government trying to squeeze some capital money out of them. So we said, you know what, I think we got a somewhat solution that's going to last them for a few years. So we did that. And with that leaves some extra space in the store now. So we just finished the renovations on that, and now we actually have a poll out for the community to provide some feedback as to what they'd like to see as our customer base. What do you guys want to see in there? This store's for them, right?
Right.
So let's do that. And obviously you've seen us move the old CIPI building here. That was quite the feat. Again, huge thank you to CIPI for that donation to the community. To continue to use for economic development in the community. We moved that now to the commercial junction, poured in some money into renovations, and it's ready for a retail store. Now, the retail store that we want to put in there is a partnership we made with a company out of Prince Albert called Pneumo Medic. I'm forgetting the name. I think it's Pneumo Medic Cannabis, or Canna Consulting. So what we want to do is start a cannabis store out of the Forks there, and our focus on there was never too much to worry about the recreational side of cannabis. This fellow that we partnered with, he's been in the medical cannabis consulting for years, as long as I've known him, and beyond that, I think he's been doing it since he was in his early 20s. So
Right.
He's a very, very well-versed guy in medical consulting. In fact, he's traveled the world. He's been to Japan. He's worked with masters of the craft there, and he himself has a medical ailment which which required him to research things like that. And so we thought it was a really good, meaningful partnership rather than just partnering with anybody out there, right? We felt this was more community minded, and it has that healing component in it, and there's a lot of people who can benefit from the research that is being done with cannabis. So we thought that'd be a meaningful partnership there. So we're hoping to see that launch here in the next few weeks. We're quite behind in our timeline, as you can imagine. We were hoping to launch before the end of the year, but you would not believe the amount of hoops you have to jump through and the dances you got to do. And I'm telling you, I can't dance anymore, Rick. So that's happening.
When is the target date for the opening?
For the opening? Oh, it was supposed to be December 1st. So we're pushing that now to just after the new year.
Okay.
I do believe we're on track now to get these last few remaining components we need from the province, as well as our own business consulting and whatnot. There's just a few loose ends we need to tie up. As you imagine, it's a lot easier when a private industry or a private person does this because they have all the clearances. But when you're dealing with a community board, you have to get clearances from all your board plus the partners, and so we all have to have that. And then once that's done, then you go to the next phase of the licensing, and then we're on the final, I believe, what to be the final phase. We've passed all our inspections. The SLGA guy came to do our final inspection. Everything's a go except for this one component we need to fix up and prove that we've done it.
Right.
And so that's where we're at right now. So we're getting the final clearances, and then once we got that temporary SLGA permit, it's go time. So.
Just in terms of the choice to go with a cannabis retail, I know drug use in our communities with the illegal drugs are raising havoc with us. It's leading to violence and some, it's like the Wild West in some of these cases, and all our communities seem to be affected with it. So, is the strategy of the community to meet people halfway instead of going to extreme with the illicit drugs? Meth is just raising havoc with our young population. Do you see cannabis as a let's meet people halfway, so to speak?
In a way, yeah, so to speak. This is one of the things years ago when we sat down with our partners is how can we use this as a bridge back to wean off of those hard drugs. When you're dealing with things like with meth and harder drugs like cocaine, heroin, which was more prominent now than meth, but as you've seen in the community presentations, we felt that it's a money thing, right?
Right.
It's not people who are on social assistance that are buying cocaine and whatnot. It's people who are working. But what we're seeing now is a pattern where that drug use is ramping up, and people are losing their jobs, their livelihoods, their homes, their family. So we feel that this drug, like I said, with the medical component in it, there's a way to use it as part of community healing. Let's get back to that. And we've never viewed cannabis to be a hard drug that's gonna take and consume your life. Like it's been around for quite a while, and we've never seen it in that light. And we thought this could be it. This could be that partnership, first of all, that again, earlier when I was speaking about a meaningful partnership, that was one of the questions we asked our partners. Is there a way or a program that you're incorporating in your methodology to wean people off of that? And he said, absolutely. He said, well, there we go. We have that's checkbox number one. I think all this other stuff about the recreational use and everything is just sort of, as kind of a side thing. We're hoping to use his talents and his expertise, and he's going to be situated here. He's not going to be that distant partner. He's going to be here at least 3 days a week to make sure that he's set up at the shop to do that side of the business as well.
Just on the latest statistics on cannabis outlets, I guess retail outlets, the province has more cannabis outlets than Tim Hortons.
You can throw a rock and there's a cannabis store, I'm telling you. Yeah.
So in the north now, this would be one of the first, right?
This would be the second.
L'Orange being the first.
Oh, yeah, I guess third then. So if you're counting the NAD line up, L'Orange would have been the first, L'Orange would have been the second, and will be the third. Yeah. So we've definitely had that in mind, and we do in part of our business plan. We were being very, very conservative with the numbers, as to say, we're aware that Buffalo might open one and Green Lake. So with that in mind, we didn't project our numbers to be we're gonna boom, we're gonna be a great business. It was never really about that. We're even at the conservative numbers. Yeah. We're doing it. The business plan is showing profitability at a very modest level. And that's really all we wanted was to, and what this is going to do as well is create 6 more jobs in the community, and decent paying service level jobs. So we're looking at it from that perspective as well. So in a time with economic struggles and everything like that, we want to make sure that there's every opportunity for people in the community to have some sort of entry level service level job.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's one of your big ventures there. I know you've mentioned the arena the last time we spoke. Is there any updates on that's
nothing
highly anticipated in our community, right?
Yeah. Every staple item, right? So I sit on some boards as well, and this is something a message I always take with me as well. In fact, I was just in Regina at the SPRA meeting, which is the Saskatchewan Parks Recreation, right. And they're also understanding. There's people around the board level too who've come from small communities in the south, like myself, and they're struggling with no arena as well. And we're keeping in touch to see when infrastructure money from the federal government comes out. You wouldn't believe the struggle, Rick, even for things that we need, such as water treatment plants, because I also sit on the Northern Municipal Trust Board, which I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago. People are struggling even without water treatment plants, and there are projects that are being denied by the federal government, and these are much needed water treatment plants. So I always think, what are my odds of getting a recreational facility? But it's about timing. we have to make sure that we're shovel ready so that when the federal government does, let's just say in 3 years, they drop that program that says, hey, we need a recreational infrastructure across Canada. Similarly, a program came out a few years ago called the Building Canada Fund, and everybody thought that would be a great fit.
Right.
If you looked at the funded ventures that came out of that fund, probably 90% water programs came out of that, including our own.
Right.
This water treatment plant was actually approved before the program was announced.
Oh.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know how much I'm supposed to say because I'm still on a sort of zip because we haven't announced anything, right? They did put the sign up there, so I can say that much at least is that, yeah, we were pre-approved and now the bills are being paid basically, right? So that was one program that came out of that, and there's a second program that's coming out of that again, now I know for sure there's no announcement there, so I can't say anything to any sort of media outlet until the federal government makes the announcement, and then the provincial government makes their announcement, and then we can make our announcement. So I know protocols. So that's definitely something we'll be announcing soon. So yes, I am keeping my ear to the ground for whenever recreation programs come. We have our blueprints ready. We have our plan ready. You've seen the draft. The only thing we're missing to be absolutely shovel ready is the geotech, and that's going to cost us upwards to about $15,000, maybe closer to 23. And so we've engaged engineers, and similarly, when we were building the Beauval development facility, we've had to do geotech, and that's just a must. And the nice thing is that the land adjacent to it, I'm hoping, is the same report, and that basically says as long as you go about 9 feet down, you're hitting solid rock. And if we get that same report from the land that's just right next to it, I'm not too worried about that wet marshy stuff. We can work on a drainage plan to get and move that water out. And basically, when we do build the facility, it'll be on piles similar to the BDI building, and the arena will sit on a solid rock foundation. And I don't think we should have too many worries about any shifting or any structural integrity type stuff. So once that's done, we'll have our geotech, we'll have our blueprints, we'll have our plan, and we just have to rejig now the construction costs, because obviously they've changed since 2021, I think was when we announced that.
Okay, yeah.
And so we'll have to rejig the numbers, but that'll come when it comes. And so I think we're about as ready as we can be, just missing the money, and we need to get them.
The capital costs are detrimental. And will it be involved under SASC builds? I know the province has been trying to.
That's what they do, is they match the SASC builds with the Canada builds money, and that's what's going to build most of the stuff. We did get and I shouldn't lean on that too much. I know a couple of years ago we were told that 2-bay ambulance structure that was coming here was approved through SASC builds. Supposedly they keep telling me that yes, it's still approved, it's just being pushed. So that is still a project that was approved under SASC builds that is still coming to Beauval, and we're still holding SHA to the wall on that one. We keep reminding them. We did the architectural, we did the site prep, we did all the things that they need. We just need them to pull the trigger on it, because that's 100% funded by the province. Right. To which they told me they will then in turn the asset to us. So they'll build it and then they'll give it to the community basically, and then we'll have to worry about the upkeep and everything like that.
You mentioned Saskatchewan Health Authority approving 2 ambulance bays. I thought there was also beyond the medical clinic. I know services here are not to par to Pine House or Sandy Bay. Those have more 24/7 care. Is that something that you're lobbying to?
Yes, I've actually spoken to the minister directly about this. It was the minister at the time, I should say, but we've also then in turn taken it to the new minister. So at the time we met with Minister Everett Hinckley about this, and he 100% agreed. But I also reminded him, I said, I want you to look at every community from Green Lake to La Loche. Right. All of those communities have built a building that was designated to be a clinic. Beauval, in the history of Beauval, you remember the old CIPI building was the clinic. Right. And now the current clinic is also in a building that was not meant to be a clinic. So it's like you're pushing a circle into a square. You cannot put a medical facility into a retrofitted building. When you design a medical facility, it should be designed to be a medical facility. So I'm hoping that, beyond the fact that our aging clinic is not doing us any favors here, I'm hoping that message that I'm giving to the ministers there is gonna basically take us to the top of the priority list. And on top of that, we've told them as a community, we've reminded them time and time again, We're willing to be part of that solution. We just need you to meet us halfway. When I say part of the solution, we're willing to build it.
Yeah.
We have access to economic dollars. In fact, years ago when BDI was being built, the clinic was supposed to be part of that plan.
Oh.
The initial blueprint, which we spent good money on, Rick, had the clinic right in there. Due to bureaucracy and waiting and whatnot, we said we can't wait anymore. We axed it out of there and put our village office and gym together and just said, let's just build this. Maybe later on we can build a clinic on and add on to it. And so, fast forward years later, they have not even made a move since then. But back then I was just more of into economic development. I was on council. I'm taking that same message, which Mayor Fred Roy at the time was taking to the ministers, and I'm hoping to drive it home. And we're hoping to see some movement from everybody I've talked to so far. They think it's the greatest idea ever, so I'm hoping to see some traction here in the next little bit. In fact, I told them I won't take any lip service. I want to see commitments on paper. So I want letters, and so we want to correspond, and I want to see something. And of course, with the election coming up, it'd be a good time to get those promises. And so that once the election's finished and everything's turned over, if the South Party get it again, I want to hold them to those correspondences.
Well, the other part, I guess, that goes with the health services in our region is integration with the First Nations. I know on reserve, there's a health authority called the Northern Intertribal Health Authority, and then Saskatchewan Health Authority created this huge conglomerate corporate health authority, but we used to have a community-based health authority. Is there any move by the mayors or by the Northern leadership to look at a Northern specific health authority, because the policy to the south seems to be privatizing? And if we go privatizing up here, we don't stand the ground. But treaty rights with health, with the First Nations, is that something that the Métis may be working on as well?
And that's just it. We're looking to pull all of the governments together. So, and again, it's kind of going to be touchy here in 2024, going into 2024 with elections coming up, civic, federal, provincial, and of course the Métis Nation. So I want to be careful as to who we get sort of political promises from, right? Because we don't know who's going to be elected in the next election. But I want to make sure that the idea is very sound, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think we need to work together as the communities and regionalize. Beauval, as much as you can say it's a community clinic, it's really realistically a regional clinic. We have people coming from the First Nations coming to use our services. We even have people from nearby hamlets coming to use the services, because there's just such a lack of health professionals right now in the region. And in fact, I see on social media all the time that there's no nurses on call, even as close as Kennel Lake sometimes. And I know Isle Cross doesn't announce it as much, but I know they've been short-staffed quite a bit lately too as well. And in fact, to the point where anything emergent, they're sending south right away. They're not even really realistically being seen quick at the hospital. But I mean, those are other discussions for another day. So adding to the mix that we understand that, and I think there is a place for some privatization as well. And I would beg to differ on that. I think we wouldn't lose. I think we could enhance. So we need to be careful and just tread forward to how much can we rely on SHA for, and how much can we bring some private solutions to kind of, blend the approach for healthcare. We're actually in talks with the emergency services right now as well, because we do note that, I was saying it'd be nice to have 2 ambulance bay in Beauval, but we don't even have 2 ambulances right now. There's such a breakdown in even the emergency equipment and stuff like that right now, and like it just kind of boggles my mind as to why they're not coming to us and asking for assistance. We're not the same community we were 20 to 30 years ago, helpless and looking for money all the time. Economic development and community development go hand in hand, and I like to see that where look around the region, right? You see Isle Cross doing well. We're starting to get there and doing well, and Jans Bay, Cold Bay, they're making a lot of strides in some of the work that they do. We're here now to be part of that solution. And I'm hoping that the province is starting to see that we can be a partner as well as anybody else in the province. So I think they really need to open their eyes and see that we're not helpless northern communities anymore. We want help, but we also want to be part of that solution. So I'm hoping that'll be the way to go.
Well, the other question is kind of our history of Beauval is based on an education economy here. We had the residential school for many years, and that's how the community flourished. There's plans for a teacher education program in 2024 with the shortage of teachers all over the place and the demise of Nortep, Norpac, where the province seemed to decapitate all the capacity of the north. You know, it's they took everything south and centralized everything, but now we're picking up the pieces. So if Beauval has an opportunity to work on an education business plan or proposal or programs, or Nortep might be a start, but I'd love to see an economy based on education, because the need is there. The medical services, the education needs, the engineering needs for development of the mines. There's there's trade needs. So is there any thoughts on the village council side on looking at the education opportunities? I know it may require partnerships with our First Nations brothers and sisters here, but any thoughts on that with the recent announcement or call for interest in Nortep?
That's like, well, as there was a program here a few weeks ago where Jason Young from the NLSD brought the CTEP, which is the CRETEP. I mean, it was just a natural evolution, and as much as I wish Nortep was still around, because we were both
it's still around.
it's still around, and definitely in spirit.
It's just no money.
Yeah, basically. And with the assets they're sitting on, right? Yeah. So I think there is a chance to resurrect it in some semblance, and I think like I also sit on the Northlands College Board, and it's a topic of discussion that comes up on almost every meeting. Nortep, right? And then we're all products of that almost.
Right.
We can all say we've spent a semester there, and in fact I was there for 2 years, and you were there as well. And it's just like we all know the model works because it just does.
Right.
And it's a northern program developed by northern people for northern people, and I think that ownership of the program made it what it was, and I think that's the model we're trying to duplicate. We'll see. I guess only time will tell if these community-based TEP programs work. I know a lot of it's based on distance education.
Right.
So I think with that in mind, we will definitely have to see how we can resurrect Nortep spirit into those programs. I do think there's a lot of successes. We've seen it in the East and the West. In the West, they had the Daigneault TEP program in Laloche, which has been running now successfully. I think they just graduated their first B.Ed Daigneault teachers a year ago, and now the intake is just getting bigger and better. In fact, the province just went in there and they converted the old, is it the elementary school?
Ducharme.
Yeah.
Will be, yeah.
It will be converted now to be the new teacher education facility. And in the east side, Cumberland has successfully graduated its first set of Cree teacher educators. So now they're taking those models, the best of the best, and trying to fit them into the communities. So again, like I said, we'll see where that goes. And like you said, it's going to take the First Nations and our Métis people to lean on their respective education funders to make it successful. Once I think those firm, solid foundations are done, I'd like to see the roll up into a Nortep program that offers master's and PhD level classes. We shouldn't have to go south. I think that research that would come from a master's dissertation as well as a PhD dissertation should be research projects based in the north. And this is the kind of discussions we're having at the Northlands College level. Is like you need another facility or whatever to lean on. And I know Northlands College sometimes is given a flack for putting that final nail in a coffin of Nortep, but I've talked to a lot of people about it, and it doesn't seem that's the consensus. But there is a partnership to flourish from that institution.
Yeah.
And I think it can happen, and we need the right key players to sit around that table and have that discussion. And I don't know if I'll be one of those people. I probably wouldn't want to assume anything. I don't know the history of Nortep, but I think the right key players who have been in there, such as my dad Joe, to get in there and have those discussions about what a future Nortep might look like.
Well, don't count yourself out. I think Nortep still has a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
It's got about $13 million asset in La Ronge, and the federal government never properly invested into Nortep. It was a provincial program fund that easily evaporated with a change of government here. So the next objective would probably be strategizing how the federal government, because education on the Métis side is being transferred to federal jurisdiction as well. So there's a lot of horizon here for us to look beyond. The other partnership that I wanted to query you on is the Northwest Communities, and also I guess the Primrose Bombing Range. And I'm not sure which organization announced the golf course at Canoe Lake, or Canoe River, I should say. It's quite a big announcement. I don't know if our community is involved in it, but maybe you can shed a little light on who is involved there and what potential is there.
For sure. Well, let's start with the NWC. So that Northwest Communities Management Corporation, it involves 7 communities. Beauval's one of them, Isla Crosse, Buffalo, Green Lake, Pachinak, Pine House, and Isla Crosse, if I didn't mention them already. So those 7 communities make up NWC. They're more invested in the ventures, as you know, in NWC Wild Rice.
Right.
They're also still have an allocation that is given to them by the province, which is not utilized right now, but they are strategizing ways as to how their forestry allocation should and when it should be utilized. Similar to any other proponent, such as Mystic and anybody else, they do have to come up with a plan, and they have to go through that, and that requires a lot of seed money to do it before you actually get your approvals to do any sort of cutting or any sort of wood ventures. So
yeah,
that's always in the back of their minds. But NWC is still invested primarily in that traditional economies. So we thank them for that. We are currently working at increasing the presence at the Forks. As you know, we had quite the bumper crop season for wild rice,
yes.
and in fact they've invested over $1.5 million into our wild rice economy here, and we want to now work out a way that we can process our own rice, because that's really where we're getting stuck right now. So I know there's a lot of talk out there as to what the heck's going on, but it's the processing. The wild rice industry right now is very cutthroat. It's like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of a thing, and you got to watch who you partner with, basically, right? Because a lot of people are in it for themselves. So we're trying to take that economy and keep it within our communities, and the only way to do that is to be involved in it from the rice, like the planting the seed, to the somebody purchasing it at the end.
Right.
As the fish plant put it when the Isla Crosse made the fish plant, it's from lake to plate. You have to be involved in every part of the process, and that's where we're kind of stuck right now. Our wall, our barrier is the processing of it, and then further taking it to packaging it and then selling it. We need to be involved in every step, and I think we're going to get there. Now, as far as the golf course announcement, that is done by our neighboring community of Isla Crosse, Saugatuck Development Corporation. So they invested in the idea of starting a golf resort just near the Kenner River. They did reach out to Beauval to see if they'd like to be involved. Unfortunately, they knocked on our door at an inopportune time when we've had money invested in different corporations, and it did require a heavy equity contribution up front in order to be involved, plus some sweat equity, which would be a problem for us. It's just a matter of donating time with our heavy equipment and our operators. But it was the cash that was going to be the issue at the time. Like I said, we've had our investments in other ventures right now. We did, however, indicate to them that we would be interested potentially later on once developments start happening. We do realize it'll probably be even a heavier. Once business gets going, the value goes up. So whatever your initial investment was asked, it's going to be probably higher. They do have, I believe, 6 partners with them at the table, including English River First Nation, if I'm not incorrect there, that are going to get this started here. I believe they had already started the clearing of the lands near Kennel Lake and whatnot. Yeah, they started doing some of the heavy equipment work already. So yeah, all the best to them, and we hope to see that happen here in the next couple of years. It's going to require definitely a lot of work, and yeah, we hope to see something come of it.
Yeah, I guess those announcements were coming like popcorn, I guess, this past year, and we weren't sure.
The money's there, Rick. I'm telling you, economic money is just getting higher and higher, and it's in fact, I was just at a meeting here where they announced that an extra $1.5 million was being transferred from the federal counterparts, not the governments, but the federal the ones who give them money to lend to these AFIs, they're called, they're Aboriginal financial institutions. That's the SMEDCOs, the CCDFs, the CIFs, all of the world. There's more money being influxed to say do more development before the end of March fiscal year. So there's actually going to be a big push for projects from different community development corporations to get projects into their queue to potentially lend money before the end of March. And so, in fact, I better go talk to Fred. I said, hey, Fred, remember those CIP ventures? We better get a business plan on their table so it can get approved before the end of March and maybe tap into some of that money.
No, technology seems to evaporate fast with our experience here at CIPI Cable, right? We thought investing into new technology that you're set for the future, but
all it takes is one decision and everything's now you have a pile of receivers here that are basically, yeah, no kidding, yeah, it's risky stuff. Yeah.
So I guess any other issues that you see in the horizon that are developing, or anything that you'd like to tell our community what's happening?
Like I said earlier, there's some stuff I can't go on too much about. I know with our there's a few things that are happening. Such as our regional landfill, so to expect that's going to affect the whole Northwest. We're part of the southern landfill, which obviously is happening right in our doorstep here, just between here and the commercial junction. We'll have a seat at that board table, so we'll make those announcements when they happen as to how people can apply to be on that regional landfill. Sorry, it's not called landfill. Solid Waste Management Board. The other thing, just like I sort of alluded to just a second ago with the CIPI developments, we purchased land next to MD's here, so where the old M&M store used to be, across from the fitness center. So we're looking to make some strides, and we've developed a partnership with CIPI and Boval Development Incorporated to develop a commercial building there to potentially open up some new businesses here in the next year or so. And I'm hoping the business plans are done. Now we just need to get into the site design and the cost. Mm-hmm. And if we can get that component done before the end of March, I was kind of being jokingly, but I'm kind of semi-serious. If I can get that plan in front of the board by March to one of the boards, SMEDCO or otherwise, or CCDF, it could potentially be approved and ready for a spring groundbreaking.
Right.
So if we can do that, that would be amazing. Regional wise, our Primrose mayors, that's Isla Cross, Boval, Cold Bay, Jans Bay. We've been looking at, going back to health services, we've been looking at ways to bring health services to the communities, because we all know more than anybody the drug problems, the alcohol problems, and I think we found a very neat service that is offered out of I don't even know if they're Saskatoon based, but we did meet them in Saskatoon anyway, and we're set to meet. We're requesting a meeting with the minister this January to see if there's any residual provincial funding that can pilot a 1 year minimum, potentially 3 years. It would be my better part, to bring a mobile service to the north to do things like detoxing and harm reduction, things like that, where there are services that can happen here. Even things like home care. We really need to take care of our elderly, and I know home care visitors are not nurses or medical professionals. They're just there to help seniors and do day-to-day stuff. But I think of the late Marcel Bouvier's predicament there when he was doing at-home dialysis. We need more medical professionals to do home visits, more so than rely on keep on going to the clinic, because I know ever since the pandemic, there are less and less home visits from the nurses. Mm-hmm. And there's a need to see our elders being taken care of in their homes, because that's where they feel comfortable, and that's where they feel less and less inclined to go to these facilities to see treatment or get treatment until it's just too late. And I think their quality of life can be improved, and including their lifespan can be extended if they just get the medical help when they need it. And that's something we all saw at the table. And if we can somehow increase our services here locally using a mobile service like that, they might come once quarterly or once a month, I don't know, what that model is going to look like. But that's the discussion I want to have with the province: is can we lean on a service like this, and can they provide it? Because I mean, they're not hiring any new nurses. They're not hiring any new addictions counselors.
Yeah.
In fact, those jobs have been advertised time and time again, and I can only imagine the surpluses they're sitting on because they're not paying anybody to do these services. And I know more than anybody with some of the government contracts we can do, they can be creative with those surpluses, and this might be a solution. You can call it a Band-Aid solution if you want, but at least it's a temporary solution for our community.
Yeah, that's the challenge with convincing a Saskatchewan Health Authority that seems to embrace all the responsibilities, and we're left,
That's
you know,
right.
because our services are unique, that as you said, you want to have a unique solution for our communities. The other, I guess, agency or body that's up north is the New North. New North has played a significant role in advocating for the municipalities, but also has been running programs and services as well whenever, I guess, funds are available. But what's the status of New North, or is there a west side divergence of regional?
Just kidding. Okay,
We gotta know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. You're really getting me with these hard questions today, Rick. Without saying too much, yeah, New North is in a little bit of trouble right now. It's trying to get itself back on its feet, and in the meantime, like you said, we tend to lean on them for a lot of that assistance, a lot of those resources. In fact, I was just at a meeting recently where other leaders were saying, yeah, what's going on in New North? And then once we've gone to that discussion, we're like, well, it's unfortunate because this topic we were discussing around the table said this would have been a perfect New North meeting for the leadership, and this would have set that guidance as to where it should go and who should lead it. And usually the CEO of New North would have been the one to champion it as well, right, for us on our behalf, because that's what New North does. They're our advocate. They're our carry the message government person. So yeah, we're at the point where right now we can't rely on them. So, as you said, a west side divergent. We've talked about that. Should we do a northwest model of New North? And I said, without duplicating services too much, can we use an organization to champion that right off the hop without actually creating a new one and building up the structure and governance and on? We've talked about using NWC as that organization. And when Nat Gardner was CEO at the time, he thought it was probably a good idea. Unfortunately, he's now since retired or semi-retired, and we do have a new CEO who's taken on the reins there. So I wouldn't want to put too much on her plate while she's still getting herself seated there with NWC. But that is still something on the back of our minds, is even if New North does get itself back on its feet, should we still look at a Northwest model? Because I think, well, we still believe that New North has a time and a place, but so would a Northwest management sort of municipal corporation as well, because we do have some very unique programs in the Northwest, and we do have some very unique needs, and health is one of them. And between health and economic development and what was the other topic we thought, even with this solid waste management and the other sort of regionalized services, including our emergency coordination plans, though even those four things would bind the Northwest Municipal Organization right off the hop. They'd be pretty busy doing something, right? And I think there is a need for one, I think.
Yeah, we've seen, I guess, a departure from the surface lease agreements that we had. The mineral lease agreements were always NAD specific, but now with the impact benefit agreements that some communities have been pursuing, it kind of isolates community against community on services and programs. So the next question is probably the two hats you may be wearing here, the municipal and the Métis governance. Mm-hmm. The Northwest Métis Council is in the constitution of the Métis, but that council is not active. It's left to the regional directors, I guess, to enact that. But there was also an agreement between the municipalities and the Northwest Métis communities. And speaking to our local president, Joe, he sees that that's a positive move, because when defining what, we got Bill C-53 in Parliament right now, it specifically says Métis government. But what can you hang your hat on here? What's the Métis government? The Métis local here is not funded, it's not supported. What's your view on this kind of void that's happening in the north? The huge, to me, it's a huge potential.
Oh, huge, yeah. I'm with the same mindset that the two governments should come together and create an understanding or an agreement that they can only, it will only work in our best interest for them to work together on all of these things. The Beauval government, the municipal government, as well as the Métis local government, this was before I was on wearing both hats simultaneously. So when I was mayor, and my dad became the Métis local president, we had an MOU drafted that basically kind of sat on those same foundational pillars of training, education, health. I can't remember the other two. But basically, the same things you would find in local governance reflect Métis governance, because, we're all in the same community.
Right.
And it only makes sense that we would want to develop it the same, and that means our interests are absolutely aligned. And in that same breath of air, I think regionally they're also aligned. I know there's a lot of work that the Métis government have to do, to which they're doing with that bill in determining self-determination and signing what could be the first potential modern day treaty. There's also that second fight that's happening in parallel to it, is establishing a land base, right? Because you can't really have too much of a self-determination government without a land base, and so that's going to have to happen relatively quickly. But in the meantime, we have some immediate needs here, and everything we've talked about just in this last little bit is absolutely 100% the same Métis needs as well. And so you can only imagine how much more powerful we would be if the two organizations were aligned and were funded properly and were properly given the resources to take that same message to government. I shouldn't be going to see these ministers alone. So in fact, when I did meet with the Minister of Rural Health, my dad, the Métis local president, was right there alongside with me, basically stating the same things I was, with the exception that he will also take that message to his counterparts in the Métis government and see what the Minister of Health and the Minister of Education can do to make this a reality, because that enhanced clinic, or really realistically a new clinic in Beauval, is going to benefit Métis people as much as it's going to benefit non-Métis and non-status and non-Indigenous, really, because Beauval is all of that, right? And so what we're really lobbying for is a facility that's going to help everybody, and I think it's time. And so with that project, and also economic development and everything else, yes, 100% agree. We're all aligned. We need to work together. We need to shed all of that pride and anything else. We understand Métis is, they're their own sovereign people now. They're recognized by the federal government. They have access to resources. We need to work together, big time.
No, we see the potential in that area, and we encourage you to pursue that. But that Northwest Métis Council, since being in a constitution, I figured that should be enacted. It's the way I look at it, it's like the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People. It's nice to have all these bundle of rights, but it's what you make of them. The government ain't going to come and help you. It's hell bent on its colonial past to take whatever they want, but for us to develop our communities, I think that's where the challenge is. So as part of developing our communities, just on the environmental front, you see the patterns are changing, the ice is uncertain out there, but with the low water and the low snowfall that we're having up to now, if we look into the future here, the springtime might bring another round of fire and relocation of evacuation, or else shelter in place for people with
Scrubbers.
Air scrubbers, yeah.
Purifiers, yeah.
So in that preparedness for emergency, I know, with the pandemic response, we collaborated with our Métis and municipal and First Nations. It was a proper way to respond to an emergency, but with the lack of delegation of authority from the governments like yours to give proper recognition to to people that were making an effort. What do you see in the future here? Do you see the villages taking control on their own, or do you see a regional
I see
partnership?
definitely a regional partnership, Rick. I think we were on the right track. I think where we were butting heads was the unclear line as to who should do what. And I think the traditional models, we need to throw them out the window. And I think we need to collaborate on what that means when an emergency is enacted. And in fact, good timing on that comment. I met with Marlo Pritchard here 2 weeks ago virtually. He was supposed to come down, but his schedule had him, as you can imagine, he's the provincial SPSA coordinator or executive director or whatever his title is. But he was willing to still meet and sit down with us. So I invited our partners from ERFN and our hamlets who are part of this to sit in on that call with Marlo, and we did. And we had a good discussion for about a good hour. And he's committed to coming down with his team in January. So again, I'm going to invite the same group of people to come down and sit, and yourself, Rick. Let's figure out what this model looks like. And I think if we can agree on what happens when an emergency is enacted and who does what, and then SPSA with their help can help us, and obviously agreements, because the province does need all those fancy legal bylaws and blah blah blah. Once that's all done, then I think it's just a matter of just doing what you would do when emergencies happen. And those were some of the topics I brought up, because I said, years ago we'd be talking about forest fires and the normal realms of things, but I think 2020 has taught us one thing, is that all those things that were on the low priority list has suddenly flipped. Now we're talking pandemic, now we're talking potential drought, now we're talking potential what was the other thing we brought up there? But it just seemed like all those things that are like least likely to happen are now happening. And of course, the wildfire is still up there. As you can see, the seasons are dry. We're talking about fuel reduction. You've seen us clear up some wood here south of the community because of responses like that. Is that if we are ever in a situation where the fire's on our doorstep, we don't need to be feeding it more fuel. Also, that's what it's called, fuel reduction program. Right. So there's a lot of programs we have to enact, and some of them are federal, some of them are provincial. And so we're hoping that with him and his team, he'll help us coordinate what that model looks like. It might need some refinement, might need some tunement, but we do need to be ready. And I don't think it's an if, I think it is going to happen again. I think we're going to experience another dry spring and a dry summer season, and we need to be more prepared. And we've seen how quick things can happen with the Losh evacuating, Buffalo evacuating, and Isle Cross evacuating. We were fortunate Beauval was not part of that list this year, but we also need to figure out how we can be good hosts as evacuees flow through our community. And is there a potential for us to be a staging ground for SPSA as well? We have SPSA in their partnership with Red Cross. Can we be setting up a staging area for when evacuees flow through Beauval? So that they can set up at the Forks and have a station, ordinances, food, vouchers, whatever they need as people go through. Because it was one thing to evacuate them. When they got to their evacuation location, it was chaos.
Yeah.
Nobody knew where they were staying. Nobody knew where to access food and water and other pieces, who to call. Those are all things as part of an emergency plan. But what had happened was, we had 3 or 4 different agencies getting involved. And that's really what we don't want when an emergency is enacted. So that's when I say about clear protocol and clear definition. That's what I want in the act, is that who do they call? And so they were given one 1-800 number. It was supposed to be for the leadership to call, and somehow that number got to the people, and that phone was bombarded every day with 100+ phone calls, and they had to shut it down. So we never want to be in that situation again too. So yeah, there's a lot of variables, and I think they just need to be organized and retuned and refined.
Well, SPSA is much like the Saskatchewan Health Authority. They've centralized everything. They took the wildfire branch out of the north. You have a water base down in Estevan now. So the south is helping themselves to the northern assets, is what I see. And what I see with the First Nations as well is they're taking the responsibility on their own. So if an evacuation happens, you're not leaving it to Red Cross or somebody receiving you. You try and keep them controlled all the way through. And the services, some of them are special needs. Some of them are special needs services, but also shelter in place. Is there an opportunity, like you said, home care? when the pandemic happened, home care was stopped.
Was stopped, yeah.
And when we needed it the most. So that coordination and that, you still need to work with the health authorities. You still need to work with the policing service, because once you leave a community, then security has to be in place. Then you still have to keep the infrastructure going. You got your water and sewer and your fire services in your community. So what capabilities do you see, or what challenges do you see with the village of Beauval with its own abilities to do that?
Well, definitely money would be the huge one. When you talk First Nations and they talk about taking on their own emergency services, obviously as a government body, they have their own financial resources. So I think one of the things we need to figure out is that similar to any sort of emergency, such as a water main break or a sewer break, there's usually a reserve fund that was set by your utility that was put aside when people pay their water bills. There's sort of an emergency reserve fund. Similarly, do we need to work with Saskatchewan government or SPSA to enact some sort of emergency reserve fund for ourselves as well that handles things like that? And what would that budget look like? Just in some of the experiences I had in the last 8 years as mayor, we've had 2 close wildfires here that were started, one at the Forks and one just north of here in the little forested area. And we've had to enact the province come in quick because of the dry season and handle it. And in the one near the junction there, we had to get sprinklers set up and a lot of fire retardant and dumping because it involved biomass.
Right.
Those come with really hefty bills, and I don't know how many people are aware of this, but they think that provincial aid comes cheap or free, I should say. It's not free. In fact, the bill that came in for the junction one was somewhere to the tune of $220,000, and that's something that the village is end up paying. We negotiated down to $150. Unfortunately, that wasn't only because we said we did supply some of our own men and blah blah blah. We think that they exaggerated the bill. We didn't want to have that argument, so they did reduce the fire hours to whatever it was, and so we still ended up paying about $150,000 on that fire. This one here to the north was a couple bombings, and then we did the mop up. But we were still billed $80,000 for the bombing. Yeah, those aren't cheap, and that was just one day. That fire was out right away. This one lasted to the tune of about a week, which is why the bill was quite high. But we had that fire out. So I can only imagine when a community is in deep crisis, what the bill we would receive from the province would be. So taking that now and just talking about evacuation, where there isn't necessarily a fire threat in the community, but in the terms like with Isla Cross, where it's nearby and there's a lot of smoke, and so that means smoke evac and everything like that. So we're talking security budget, home visit budget, or whatever the case is. Those are all costs that would not come from the province, that would come from the municipality. And so it'd be pretty hard to estimate, but I think if anything, we would have to sort of budget that out, what a crisis might look like for maybe 1 month, and just price it out and see how prepared do we have to be, and how much money would we need to have it in reserve to enact a potential crisis, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that would be, and then what would happen is either we would need a combination of provincial resources to help also help offset our own municipal costs. I dare not think about it, but it's something that we do need to think about for sure, Rick, and I don't know where the money would come from, to be honest.
Well, in terms of, I guess one of our first fire wake-up calls was Fort McMurray. And Fort McMurray and how it developed itself, I don't know if you know the history of it, but there was a municipal community of Fort McMurray. But when they looked at the oil sands and they wanted to, I guess, collect taxes from all these industries, they created the Wood Buffalo County. So in the north here, we have the municipal governments, but we don't have the rural municipalities. So what they did in Fort McMurray is they took the rural municipality and made it into their county. That is what I see missing here. If you look at the rural municipality budget in this province, I'd have to research what that $1 trillion budget would be, but we don't have a rural municipality. But back in the 80s, Options 80, if you remember the regional government that they talked about, the Rural Municipal Council, They were actually going to create one RM for the north with 7 councillors in one reeve. What's wrong with that today? New North, what gets peanuts, maybe 300,000 maybe from the provincial government.
I think, yeah.
But if you look at half the province, what the entire rural municipality budget is to the south, that's our trappers, that's our wild rice, that's our outfitters, that's our traditional land users out there. They don't have roads, they don't have the natural gas, they don't have these issues. So in terms of developing the north, do you see maybe we should be challenging the province with a model instead of them waiting for, like you said, we can't wait for handouts. Let's design something with our own governments, maybe a regional government, like even northern Quebec has a regional government within its province. What's stopping us from that type of dialogue?
Yeah, I've asked, and I think there is, because we're also legislated by a separate act from the south, right? They have the Municipalities Act and we have the Northern Municipalities Act. But from what I understood, because I did inquire about that, is there a way to incorporate a county or some sort of regional government system? And I think the answer was, it's possible. And so I think we just need to be creative as to what that looks like. And I also challenged our other surrounding mayors. It's like, maybe we can take our Primrose communities of Isle-Croix, Beauval, Jans Bay, Colfay, and start there. Let's pilot an RM. Let's see what it looks like. Let's kick it off the ground and use a little bit of our seed money from the Primrose Trust to create it and see what that looks like. And let's start with that, emergency services. Let's just even prioritize, number one, let's just start that. Let's do emergency services, create a model, and then build it up. Then let's look at health, then let's look at education. I don't think it's a bad idea, Rick. I think it's worth looking at, and we just need the proper guidance to get it started, I think.
I think that regional planning is going to be so critical, especially once they have an all-weather road at Fort McMurray. They're talking about a northern corridor.
Don't talk about that yet. That gives me, my blood pressure will go up.
Well, they got a plan for it. I know Meadow Lake is resisting it. They want the economy flowing to Meadow Lake, right?
And ideally so do we, right?
Yeah.
But, so we have to be ready.
Yeah. So planning for your future, and I think what do you see in your crystal ball? I guess beyond 2024.
What do I see?
What would you like to see develop in the north, or specifically Beauval, if you wish, but for the north?
Well, yeah, specifically the north, but yeah, talking about that road and just what I see, like this corridor could be a very high traffic corridor very soon, and that's always sitting on the back of my mind. Years ago, when I took on the role of executive director at the Primrose Lake Economic Development, I took it upon myself to read all of the reports they had paid for basically through all these consultants, and there was particularly 2 reports I want to focus on: the Highway 155 report as well as the Northwest Economic report. And they spoke specifically of that road because I think at the time that was the discussion around there on the 2007-2008 time period.
Right.
So they were getting reports as to what should they do. And those reports, usually they're very positive and saying, yeah, you guys can do this, you guys can work on that. But they were very real. They were very real as to, we're not ready. Like if you look at all the services from La Loche to Green Lake, and if they open up that corridor and it became an enclosed circle from Alberta to Saskatchewan, and they were looking at our services along the way, we're not ready. We don't have the accommodations. We don't have the gas stations. We don't have the tourism. We don't have anything. This is a slow build. And so if I'm thinking long term, and this is where I miss conversations with Nav Gardner, because we used to muse about this stuff all the time. We need to set these foundations now. In fact, we should have set them 20 years ago, but the best time to do something is now. And so I think we've started setting the foundations for exactly that. We're starting to slowly set up these services along our corridor. Tourism is starting to come to the forefront. And I think, the worst thing that can happen is for this thing to open up tomorrow. But I'd like to see it happen in the next 5 to 10 years, because that's going to be our economic prosperity for this future. And I think as long as every economic development in each communities, or if we're working together as well as a region for things like golf course and whatnot, we will be in a better position to handle that influx of people coming in from all corners, right? But there's always a flip side to that coin. The other piece that's been nagging at the back of my brain is that we're dealing again with addictions and drugs and whatnot. And right now, there's one route to get in, especially it seems to be coming from Edmonton. my worry is that by opening up a new route, access to it is just going to be greater, and it's going to be harder to track. It's going to be harder to take care of, and I think it's only going to get worse if we don't enact some more hard-hitting measures to get meth and cocaine flowing into our communities from these cities in Alberta, unfortunately. So we got to look at this from both angles. Are we ready economic, and are we ready as a community to handle that influx?
Yeah, you see the state of emergency called in Pelican Narrows. I know Laloche has seen a spike in these all our communities.
And they're the ones I'm worried about the most, is because they're the first, once you get off that Alberta road, Laloche is right there. I'm worried.
So I think back to our hope. I think it's a regional solution as well, because community safety, as you see from the pandemic response, we still meet every Wednesday with our medical health officers on the status of the COVID is still on the rise. The flu and RSV are wild, but on the health spike, the other part that we see is syphilis. Syphilis is I don't know if it's related because of the meth activities, because of the inducement of people in their state of mind at that level, and then, or is it the lack of medical services? So it's one or the other, but community safety has certainly reared its head to us. We all depend on the RCMP because of the policing services that we have, the justice system, but we also have these checkpoints that we did during the pandemic, and a lot of our citizens felt safe with that type of endeavor. So is community safety another agenda item besides the climate or the emergency response? But community safety is kind of a state of emergency now. What do you see in Beauval for partnering, I guess, with the RCMP or neighboring communities? Because some people get evicted from our community and will go to on reserve, or reverse happens
it's the
as
other
well.
way around. It's mostly the other way around. Unfortunately, municipalities aren't able to evict anybody. More so, what happens is they get the boot from their home due to a scan or whatever else, and their only option is to, if they're First Nations, is to apply for housing on the reservation. But going back to your original question about community safety, yes, this is something we had started meetings here a year ago or so ago. Mayor Sandy Erickson from Buffalo initiated that, because as you see in the news, Buffalo's been getting some negative news coverage in regards to drug activity. But I mean, it's happening everywhere. It's just who gets busted and when and where, right? Because it's everywhere you look. And so I guess the question is, what's our response to that? And part of it is not 100% on the backs of the RCMP. I think the RCMP are doing a really good job of investigating and busting some of these drug sellers and what have yous. But I think the other half of that is what happens afterwards. What we've seen in our history, and this is where we're going to really rely on the leadership of all communities, is to get together and approach the Ministry of Justice to say, the sentences and the conditions that are being handed out to people who are busted, because that's where you need them to be, because you can only speculate, because every community knows who their drug dealers are. Unfortunately, there's not enough evidence for RCMP to pursue charges. But I think once they get to that point, and once they're charged and they're convicted, this is where the harsh rules need to start happening, because they're basically, in essence, getting slaps on the wrist. And what happens too is when people return to their home communities and they're under conditions, they're very loosey-goosey. And I think part of that responsibility is also their probation officers as well. I'm not going to name any names, but I've heard the sentence given out by a PO officer where they said that sounds like an RCMP problem, when the RCMP are trying to say, you're not even enforcing your conditions. Why are you giving them weekend passes? Like, why are you letting them basically, in essence, run rampant as if they're a free person with no conditions, and basically being told that's your guys' job? Okay. And I'm like, wow, okay, when you have two levels of justice, one capturing criminals and putting them in jail, and one giving them conditions when they get out, if these two aren't jiving, we're the ones who suffer in the end. Yeah. Because they're being released early, they're being put in communities where, in essence, we wrote community impact statements saying, it'd be nice if they found another place to live, especially when they're not from here. Right. They may have shacked up here or whatever you want to call it. They need to be enforced away from the place where they're doing criminal activities. but that's not happening.
Yeah.
And so we suffer in the end, and we try, and I've been writing statements out of my wazoo. I don't know what else I can do, and I think it's going to require a regional push to see some reformative changes in the justice system, because otherwise RCMP are just going to keep catching the same criminals over and over and over, and nothing's going to come to light of it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the policing contract in this province is run by the province, so a lot of the First Nations have been going to the federal government for the move with James Smith. Pelican Narrows has got community security workers now funded by the federal government. That's probably where I see this kind of model, if it's regional, and as we talked about before, I think the potential is there. I guess in closing, 2024 is going to bring another round of elections, municipal, school board, provincial elections, Métis elections. Going to be a lot of campaigning in the new year. But just as we finish here, maybe acknowledging your council, maybe just let our people know who your councillors are right now, the village councillors, so we can acknowledge them. And if there's any issues, people can still approach them or get some campaign promises for next year.
You hold them to the fire, guys. Yeah. Especially with the election coming up.
So let's start with your deputy mayor.
For sure, yeah. My deputy mayor since the beginning onset has been Wendy Eldridge. She's my deputy mayor, and she is my right-hand lady. Also in there is Bill Roy. We also have Elvina Obashan, who's been leading a lot of the social healing circles and whatnot. So she's been doing a great job at that. And we also have Thomas Helcrow, who's also been sitting on our EQC, who we just had a meeting here recently, for finally, since before 2019. And also some economic development as well. So, and he's been kind of spearheading the arena project there as well, and seeing how we can continue to move that forward as well. So yeah, so with elections coming up, there's my council. I do believe they have interests in running again, so make sure that you approach them, ask them what their plans are for 2024 to 2028, and yeah, we'll be seeing them here in the near future campaigning.
Well, thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. And once again, this is Nick Daigneault, our mayor of the northern village of Beauval, and also sits on the Métis Council, the local N37 council, I guess.
Yeah.
And we'd like to thank you, Beauval. And this is Rick LaLiberty, CIPI News. And this is Treaty 10 News as our regular program. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.